Hi, everybody. For today's guest, we've invited David. He's the co-founder or the founder of Hotjar. I don't know if you know about Hotjar, but it's a very, very popular solution for web analytics. And David built the company to more than 4 million in ARR. He built a fully remote team, and that was even before that was cool. Along the way, as company grew organically to 400 employees, there was also obviously a lot of stress. So there, David, you've suffered a burnout in the midst of the COVID pandemic. You took some time off to focus on your well-being, and you came back to Hotjar and build it up bottom up with mental awareness in the culture of the organization. I think that's a really, really good example of a good, healthy organization with good culture around employees and work. And this will be the topic of our today's discussion. So my name is Luka. I'm the co-founder of Joan, and I will be hosting David today on this Future of Work podcast. So, David, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I kind of had this basic introduction, but how about you add something more to that?
Yeah, a better way of describing me is I'm a son to immigrants who ran off to Australia and then came back to Malta, confused by the Maltese language and tiny island. And someone always wanted to build a company, but I had no idea what it actually was going to be involved in because I had no one in my family actually had a business. But I'm a person driven by change, by empathy, and just love hanging out with great people, building cool projects. So that's David.
You started up small. You built the company to 400 employees. How large was Hotjar before you finished your journey there?
Yeah, so Hotjar was acquired around 3 years ago. So I think we were just over 300 people then. But then I stayed on for another year and a half, advising, consulting, and working with the two organizations, then eventually three or more, I don't remember. But yeah, it was interesting to be involved in also the journey of going beyond and getting around 400, right? But there's been ups and downs as well. So
I can imagine lots of good war stories probably there.
Yeah, great.
So today I want to talk about kind of how employee well-being affects productivity. You suffered from the burnout yourself. Can we start with that? Can you tell us a bit more how you even know you reached out a burnout, what that meant for you, and what did you do afterwards?
Yeah, it's a good question. How did the answer is I had no idea I had burnt out. So I was just on a call now. I take a lot of calls trying to help people who are starting businesses, especially very early on. And I was saying, I got a burnout on the back of a burnout on the back of a burnout. But it took me 3 years to realize that that's what actually happened. I was the classical guy who said or thought burnout doesn't exist, right? Like, because I had just endless energy.
You just need to push harder, right?
Yeah, just think, well, what's the big deal? But the reality is, life is a journey, a business is a journey. And in my case, it was young kids, just done a house, ups and downs with the business, not to talk about a little bit all the stuff going up there, right? Because we are all the products of our upbringing, right? Of our good and bad experiences. And when all of that was put together, I think that's what ultimately led to the burnout. But with the power of hindsight, now I see what had happened to me, which is I had failed with many projects before Hotjar, right? So I don't come from a network of people who have succeeded in business. I don't come from a country where there's entrepreneurship, right? Tiny island where you're lucky to get a good job, right? So and we had this crazy dream of why don't we do everything different, right? Like why don't we create the ultimate place where we want to work? And it worked. And we were like, oh my God, you know what I mean? So I think we were already creating this thing of, oh my God, this actually worked. So we were already, I think, putting pressure on ourselves of this has to reach the dream that we had set upon us, or at least maybe on me. Then I think the fact that I'm a perfectionist, my background is design, product, so I had this very strong vision of where I wanted this to go. Right? I'm always mentioning things which are good, right? This is what leads you to success, but those are also two-sided coins, right? Which can then come back to bite you. So that pressure of wanting to do something amazing, then the ups and downs, that pressure of wanting to succeed, and then you're suddenly hit with all of those problems as you scale. And we were bootstrapped, right? So we didn't have a board. So it was all of us kind of trying to just figure this out as we went along. The cherry on the cake, which is what then kind of unlocked everything, was COVID. Because with Hotjar, we always wanted to run a profitable, sustainable business. We were always careful not to go too far, too fast. But then COVID really made us think, right? How much funds do we have in the bank? Okay, we are profitable, but what happens if the unthinkable happens? And that, I think, led this slightly OCD perfectionist brain into kind of a complete meltdown.
Mm. I still remember those COVID times. So much stress, you know, so much up and down. And I think we kind of collectively forgot how it was, how bad it was, you know, at the beginning of COVID, where if you're running a business at that time, like you're kind of asking yourself the tough questions. I mean,
Absolute uncertainty.
yeah, what happens if nobody comes to the office from tomorrow, right? What will happen is if you're a co-founder or an owner or somebody who's responsible for all of these tens or hundreds or thousands of people that work for you, you know, to provide for them and their families and whatnot, it's super tough, right? So, okay, I guess that's the perfect storm, right? So,
Yeah. And I think it actually, because I think it's worth mentioning, this journey of burnout actually led me to discover resiliency, which is nearly a word I didn't even know what it meant back then, in the sense of you read it in a book or you write it in a sentence, right? But what really is resiliency and where does it come from? And I think probably it's one of the most important things that's missing from the education of our children, or how we speak about entrepreneurship and like those initial startups stages, like because teaching resiliency, the ability to face uncertainty and problems and adversity and to come out of it.
the,
You know what I mean? Singing a
I
song.
mean, can you really teach that?
I think you can. I think you can. I think it, but again, it comes from ultimately the mindset and what you get at home, right? But look, an interesting story, which is I spoke about the fact that I come from a family where there was no entrepreneurship, right? Like I was taught, you get a job, you stick to the job, right? And in Italy, you call it the posto fisso. You get this great job, you get the incomes, the salaries coming in, you're safe, great, and then make sure you keep that job, right? But I always love to mention them. When I was in college, there was this program called Young Enterprise, which I think the name has changed now, but it's basically this idea of you bring students together, they do 1 year, they build a business, they sell a product. And I joined this for fun. And it was the best experience ever. It just unlocked all of these things, right? So my point is, even though I wasn't taught that at home, it was something that I found through a program that someone created. So it's
So, but I'm gonna challenge you a bit on this because even when we do hiring, I think like this, like the resilience or persistence in a way, in the face of adversity, is what defines a really, really good coworker, or a really good employee. If you're able to take all of these problems that you face day in, day out, this could be like entrepreneurship, or this could be
Your role.
This could be your work, right? I mean, the coding, design, I don't know what. There's lots of challenge, but like taking the punches and moving forward and improving and growing, it's like kind of a super important skill. So, what makes you believe that it's a thing that you can learn? It's not some kind of a part of your culture, your upbringing, stuff like that.
It's a good question. The answer is probably that I'm a positive person. Maybe too positive at times. Yeah. How effective we can be at teaching it? Maybe not. I think awareness already goes a long way, right? Like, for example, at Hotjar, I remember in our first year, we always tried to organize like discussing topics. Like, for example, we talked about imposter syndrome, and we brought someone to speak at one of our meetups about it. And this person who was running the session started asking questions, right? Just to understand, do I suffer from it? And 5 questions in, I was like, shit, I suffer from imposter syndrome and I'm doing that. So sometimes it's less about the labels, but I think it's more about talking about it's more about you're not alone, right? And just, I think, exercising the muscles maybe which are more up here is, I think, goes already a long way.
I give you this, right? It's, I don't know if it can be taught or not, but for sure building the correct environment can amplify the good or the bad, right? And having a supportive environment in which you're able to thrive, and kind of, that if you have this resilience, and then you kind of the environment supports you along the way, I think that's what you can influence. And for sure you can't change everybody, right? But especially if you're on the border, or if you're somewhere and you can get to there, that's something that you can do, right, with the correct culture. So I guess that's how I want to look at that. Now we've been discussing this burnout, and what happened next?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and actually you made me think of something else. I think one of the biggest mistakes, because resilience can be thought about as a kind of a characteristic or a trait, but it can also be thought of as kind of as a practice.
Yes.
So later on, when we hired some great leaders at Hotjar, right, like we started punching maybe above our weight in terms of leadership.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to see, and I can mention Mo, who was the CEO of Hotjar and took the role afterwards, which we'll come to that topic next. It was great to see how he took problems in his stride, right? Or other people, how they balanced off with hitting the gym, right? Or having passions and things that they did. So I think in hindsight, again, it was ironic to me that we created a great environment and preached a lot to the team about how to do things. And then I was the one doing, somehow I thought that I had to be different and I had to sacrifice myself completely for the business. So in hindsight, if I probably just, which I do, right? So if I exercised every day, if I kept those hobbies. So the problem is that, again, I'm quite the all-in person, right? So I choose, like, I'm very good at focusing, prioritizing, which is, again, good, but has its bad. So in terms of what came next, so yeah, I went into a dark place, and what happens is, especially when you burn out, right? Someone maybe hearing this can identify with it. You start to become more negative, which is not typically my character. Started to see things kind of more on the dark side, isolate myself a little bit, throw myself more into work. And this is where I started to realize, especially my wife made it very clear to me that I was on the wrong path. So then there was a lot of reflection on my end, which is, what do we do, right? The company was under pressure because it's an interesting industry. Things are moving along. The tech was changing, more competitors.
Mm.
So there was a need to double down, but I needed to rest, right? So the immediate thing, though, that I did was, I think it was the first time that I really kind of practiced what I preached, was I said, I need to create a plan make myself better, right? I already knew that the CEO role wasn't for me, in the sense that I couldn't be the board, the CEO, the shareholder. I can't be all of this, right? And I'm stepping into the shoes of the roles. So then ultimately came down to a decision. This is deeply personal, right? There's no right or wrong. But ultimately I said, who do I want to be? Do I want to be the CEO and have a board, or do I want to be the board and have a CEO? Then I want to be the board. I want to hire a CEO. Especially because I had reached the point where I started to realize my job was actually building a team that can succeed. It was not building a great product or building a great, in this role, that's your job, right? I was also very lucky to find, as I said, some great leaders. So the plan that I made in my mind was, okay, I'm gonna disappear for 3 months, put people in charge, and just see what happens, right? Because ultimately, I'm not in a good place. I was struggling to let go, and I just need to rip this Band-Aid off. And it was really interesting for me to just leave for 3 months. Felt better, but barely had, it was really good, but it barely had an effect, right? So I knew I needed much more. I needed a big change. And the business went on. I was not really necessary, right? Which again is a great thing. At Hotjar, we had focused a lot on operations, definition of roles, how the business is run. So I had done all this work of preparation, but I hadn't kind of really benefited from it at all. So that was the next step. So that's what came next. And then from that is what unfolded my grand plan of succession and how to build out the business and how to kind of take myself out of that CEO role. Yeah, but then obviously your plan and things went a little bit differently.
Sure. And we'll get to that. I mean, in terms of, going through all that you've gone through, ups and downs, building a culture, not living the culture, kind of realizing that that's not okay, kind of listening to yourself in a sense, and kind of moving forward. How did it feel like? I mean, you took 3 months off all of a sudden. I mean, that had to be totally strange for you. I mean,
it was freaking fantastic, man. Also, I timed it well. I was telling you, I'm a big summer person, so this was around summertime, and I just spending time with the kids at the beach, relaxing, reading a book. So it was shocking, yeah. But it was kind of this realization of, oh my gosh, I had forgotten even what this was like, right? Because we had been now, I think at this point it was 6-7 years of just the grind nonstop.
Grind. So, and then you said after that coming back, then there was this gradual approach, kind of recouping the energy, right? And what was the number one thing that helped you the most, or how did you get to a really good place, and how did that influence what you've built in Hotjar in terms of the, let's say, company culture?
Yeah. So when you say how did it influence the culture, you mean later on?
Or I'm guessing you came back to the office, you started working, you saw that you're still not at the place where you should be. Then I guess you changed some personal approaches, but you also started thinking about the wider culture in Hotjar and how this could adapt, how this could be improved, right?
Well, actually, we had already put in place a lot of good things from a culture point of view. But at that point, you're right. It's a good point. At that point, we did then revisit the culture because we wanted to start thinking about more. Yeah, I want to find the right way of saying this, right?
Did you ever think about, if you were not kind of following the culture, how many people like you were at Hotjar who were doing the same?
No, actually, it was the other way around. So what was happening was, because it's interesting, right? We're
Yeah.
talking now. This is nearly 4 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So you've jolted a little
Yeah.
bit, kind of some memories. But here's what happened. So what's interesting was I was kind of taking on this fatherly figure, but like more taking care of the company. I think I was protecting a lot the team. The culture was a lot about like respect, taking care of each other and whatnot. But then I was being hit by the responsibility and by the worry about the business and how we were doing. And I think that what we had created was this divide where the culture then, looking at it and how it was articulated, was very geared towards being safe and respect and whatnot. But I wasn't sharing that kind of need for us to perform with the team because I was taking that for granted, right? So that I think also, look, there's a lot of personal shit that was going on, right? But I think that was also one thing, right? I was feeling this agitation that we're not performing and doing well enough. We didn't want to put too much pressure on the team, but at the end, I was the bottleneck of that, and the industry wasn't waiting for anyone, right? Our customers, they wanted a great product that works.
Right away.
So there was so what we did was, so you're right, it was after those 3 months, which is then I put a succession plan in place, new CEO, a new leadership with a new plan. But we also felt it was important to go to the team and share what we had learned and to say, listen, our culture is not changing in the sense of we're not doing U-turns, but we missed a few ingredients here, right? So it's respect. But yes, respect is also means that you do your job. It's not just about being nice to each other. And when we say we move fast and we get things done, it also means we look at results, right? I'm just taking random examples, but we kind of refined, we went in more detail to make sure that we're articulating it properly.
So I guess a big part of why you took so much on your shoulders is probably also a question of trust, right? Who do you trust with all of these really hard topics that you protect the rest of the team from? And I guess when you talk about succession, this is exactly what you did, right? You were thinking how to get leaders that take these topics off of your back, and also how can you trust them that they're gonna do a good job, right?
Yeah, trust is a big one. Look, I think ultimately, I tend to do this, right? But I put most of the blame on myself in the sense of, I think most, especially strong founders, typically the culture and how the company shapes up is usually a reflection of kind of their character with their strengths and their weaknesses and everything. It's true over time. You start to see that there's a lot of that. It makes sense, right? So in a way, I think for me, the traits in myself that I always want to please people, I'm caring, right? I worry a lot about like how people feel and think about what we're building. So I think I went a little bit over on that side. But at the same time, talking about what we refined and what we fixed and what we changed, I think especially with the new leadership, the key pillar, the thing that we had to make sure was still there was this mindset about trust. And I think that's where we did well in the sense that I think the underpinning of Hotjar, like the way we ran the business and why the culture was successful, was because it was so much about trust. And trust is easy to say the word, right? But ultimately, I think the best manifestations of trust are, one, being transparent. So it's actually written into our values. So the whole idea that we build trust through transparency. So it's about how are we going to run the business? How did we take this decision? We're uncertain about the future. Like, so you share that, right? So you're not dealing with kids, you're dealing with adults, and you have that open. I think that's where trust comes from. And then also admitting where you made mistakes, right? And being open about that. And then finally, I think one important thing that was taught to me, especially by Mo and the new leadership team, was the importance of creating an environment where it's safe to fail. And this is a big piece in trust. It took me some time to really. So imagine David, right? This designer person who's focused on creating this great business and everything, right? And I want things to work well. In the beginning, it's all fun and we trust each other and all that. But as I'm starting to get more frustrated, right, and things are becoming more difficult, I was transparent about what I wanted to achieve. But as soon as something went wrong, I was the CEO who jumped in and said, why did we do this? Does that make sense? No, we need to fix it. Because I expect things to. And the problem is that when you're doing that and when you're not letting your team fail, so giving them that feeling of safety to fail and learn, then that becomes a trust problem, right? So do I trust you to do the job? And I think most leaders, and I was horrible at this, right? Most leaders don't realize that what you are effectively doing is you're building a team that has to fail and learn. Now, obviously, you can't fail and not learn and just keep on failing, right? But I think the safety piece is really important and it kind of links back to performance and doing well.
And I mean, and kind of letting them fail. Even I remember, like, from my stories, I had this case of somebody that I knew that he was wrong. Like I was 100% sure that this is not the correct way. But I looked at the case and said, okay, it's time for him to learn. Like he won't listen. He won't know until he experiences that. And I kind of let him fail. It's fine. We'll fix the moment of failure. If you look at it from a positive perspective, as a teaching, moment, is so valuable, especially if you're a high performance organization where you tend not to fail too much, because like there's all these great individuals that kind of help you prevent the fails, like fix the mistakes without you saying anything, right? And I think I fully agree here with you, right? If you want to build a high performance organization, having this culture of failure is super important.
And more than the culture of failure, which is, I think, the piece took me long to understand, is the safety to fail.
Yeah.
That you're not going to show up on the meeting and on the Zoom there's someone who's like, they're disappointed.
Yeah.
So that you don't feel safe.
Yeah.
So in reality, like, the ingredients are so easy when you think about it, right? But we get caught up. It's so easy to focus on the stuff that's not important.
But again, like, at the same time, I'm gonna step into my boomer shoes, let's say it like that, and
go for it.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell, right? I mean, somebody failed. Like, you can't. Where's the excellence? Where's the output? I mean, we're a high performance organization. Why are we allowing this, let's say, underperformance or these things to happen, right? People need to work harder, better. Like, what's your take on that? Like, that position?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because I think it would be a disservice to stop with safety to fail.
Yeah.
We say bye, and like that would be the worst message ever. So it's one ingredient within the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So I think the most important lesson for me was, number one, you need very clear goals, or whatever framework you use, but use a good one. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. I've seen too many businesses come up with weird stuff. But you need very clear goals that cascade. And I think that's the job of a leader. A leader that can't articulate clearly what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
In terms of timing, clarity, how you measure it. Like, I know this is the boring stuff, but that's your job as a leader. Right? So where are we going to be in 1 year?
And especially, and I guess this is even more important if you run a remote or a distributed team, right?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. I think in a remote business, you have to do it.
Yeah.
In a physical space, it's kind of, but we're here.
Yeah.
I think you need it no matter what, wherever the hell you are.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree here with you. It's more about the physical presence hides or let's say hides this error, or hides the problems of not having goals, right? Because you can have this culture,
false safety.
Yeah. And we have this 4-day work week. We run that, and without clear goals, it's impossible to run that, right? Because you need to revert. If you don't have goals, you can't measure. If you can't measure, you don't know if you're doing a good job. And then you can always feel that people could do more, in a sense. And then if you start going down that path, sooner or later you're like down that path, like, okay, why isn't this person still here at 5 p.m, right? I mean,
you start latching on to these things which are
I mean, I fully agree with that view, but on the other hand, like it's really interesting that like you look at Chinese culture, like, and then their 996 approach, like working from 9 to 9 6 days a week, right? Which is the other extreme. And I really wonder how much this ties to culture of a country, or like of a geography, and how much this is part of what people have been taught in business schools, and how much is kind of what's kind of the reality, or are we just like kind of the Chinese way is the status quo, like what we're talking here is kind of this our status quo, or how do you view that?
To me, the answer is really easy, which is I think the biggest mistake that we make when we speak about like how we work is we're looking for the silver bullet. Right? And the reality is it all depends. What the hell are you making? Right? If you're laying a train track, working from home is not going to work well.
Fully agree.
You know what I mean? Are you a Chinese manufacturing company? Then we know what's going to happen, right? Like, are you a niche software business run by parents? We know what's going to happen there, right? So I think ultimately it all comes back to, and I this is my first question when I advise someone, right? They ask me, I have a call, I heard your interviews, I'd like your advice, I'm starting a business. The first question I ask them, what do you want? What do you want? Because it all starts there. What is your goal? Is there a purpose? Are you trying to change the world? Do you want a Lamborghini? Do you want passive income? Right? And everything starts from there.
And you really need to be honest, right? Because
I love that you picked up on that.
Yeah, because you can't project, right? Projecting, that's the worst. Like, be honest.
And that's what everyone does.
Yeah.
So you know what I tell them? Don't reply now. I want you to go to a deep, dark place. Go dark. You need to go fucking dark. Really dark. Right? What do I want? And then question a little bit, right? Why do I want it as well? But then you need to write it down. Then you need to manifest, like, what is it? And then obviously, depending on what you want, then the path is very different. So for me, what I wanted was freedom. So I wanted
and being freedom. I don't know if that's totally compatible with you being a founder of a company. This is the reason, this realization that you want freedom? Was this what in the end made you sell Hotjar, move forward, or?
No, I don't think so, because freedom for me was I'm the project person. Right? I always need a project. So I'm constantly inventing. My wife's like, you're driving me crazy. Like every day, it's like something new. So I love projects. I love working with people. So that's what drives me. So for me, freedom was the freedom to not have to do something I don't want to do. The freedom to not have to sell my time. The freedom to live wherever I want, right? The freedom to spend time with my kids. The freedom that if my kids need to go to the doctor, I can take them. So to me, freedom was kind of more in that sense. Yeah. So again, to answer your question, if we start from that answer, then everything becomes obvious, right? So I think it's what do you want to build, who you are, what you want to achieve. You see, and when you think about it, there's so many different ways of cooking this dish.
Yeah, and then basically that also defines the culture, because I mean, would you agree, like, the culture starts with the founder, starts with the leadership that's currently at the company, if the founder departed. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you've built at Hotjar, I guess it's a directly comes from your views, your personal beliefs, right?
Yeah. I have a very strong opinion on this, which is, and it wasn't the same when we started Hotjar, right? So this, hindsight helps a lot. Culture to me is an output. To me, it's a lagging metric. And I think the input, which is the most important thing, is values. So in fact, at Hotjar, we tried as much as possible to make it more about values. So we hire not for a culture fit, we hire for value fit. And what are our values? We create values book, not a culture book, because culture is just the result of how well or badly you interpret and put the values in work, right? So I think you can measure culture, but you can't impose a culture. You can only impose values.
Did you spend a lot of time like really working on the values, like really typing them?
Too much time. No. Well, actually, Hotjar, I think we had 4 versions.
Okay.
So the first one actually was 7 sentences written. It was like us, the co-founders, me, Mark, Jonathan, Eric, and Johan. And we just said, okay, how do we want this place to be? Like if we could have the perfect place to work, and we just wrote down 7 sentences. And they were quite crap, but they were really clear. They were just really pragmatic. And then the biggest mistake we did was we kind of then a couple of years later, I think so, we made them a little bit more slick, which is one of the worst words I hate. Project slick, right? You find this a lot in business. So we made them a little bit nicer, but we lost a little bit of that kind of, you know what I mean? That Hotjar spice, directness. So then we revised them again, but then what you asked about, the post-burnout, we brought more of the directness back.
So, I mean, we obviously a lot of culture is tied to the founder, right? The founders, because of the values that they bring in, right? How did that change after you left?
That's a good question, and the reality is I don't know, but I'm quite sure it did. Because obviously, look, I had never experienced an acquisition firsthand, right? But and I was probably a little bit naive going into it. We were lucky to keep the 2 businesses separate, and we kind of emphasized a lot on the need to do it. But I'm now aware that that's changing, and I'm no longer present to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But protecting I think it's very difficult unless you keep the 2 entities separate. It's very difficult if you don't do that to keep a culture, like the values intact. Because again, going back to the values culture, right? If the values are different, then you're gonna have 2 different outputs.
So if somebody, let's say somebody watches this, listens to this podcast, watches you talk, and okay, I want to start thinking, okay, I want to build a company that's super nice for my employees. I want to build a really futuristic, or let's say a modern, no, it's not even that futuristic. So a modern organization that really puts the health of the employees in focus. What would you say that should be the first step for that kind of person?
So they want to create a business that puts the health of their employees.
Because they want to build like you did. Your values. These were your values. Like you care for others, and if you want, or let's say if you want to transfer, you get a business. You see that it's not like this, and you want to change this, right? What would you do first?
So changing a culture by changing values in an existing, you just made the question even more difficult. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. Look, to me, ultimately, culture is I think leaders carry a huge responsibility in shaping culture through the decisions that they make. And the decisions, it's very important there to be transparent and communicate and always show how the values are leading to taking decisions and whatever those are. Because ultimately they set the example, right? So if I came into a business and I wanted to change the culture, which we said is a lagging output, right? The first thing I would do is I would first interview everyone, right, to understand how do they truly describe the company. Usually the best way to do this is to try and present the company as a person and how do people describe it. So that's very effective. So I wouldn't even look at the values that are written. I would start by doing that first.
What's the reality?
What's the reality? Then I'd look at the values that are written and then try and comprehend, right? And also stories are important. So as a person, I would describe it. What are the stories that led to you describing in that way? And then I would look at, okay, what do we want it to be? You prescribe new values. And then you need to go brutal, right? Because ultimately, the only way that you bring change is that anyone who's not aligned with those new values, which needs to be done not as one person alone, right? Needs to be, but anyone who is not completely on board needs to feel comfortable to lead from a leadership point of view. Because from then onwards, every story, every decision needs to reflect those new values. So, and you need to be prepared for this to take a long time, but it can be done, right?
During your time at Hotjar, right, going through these modifications, transformations, personal realizations, what was kind of the one thing that had the most impact on the environment in which these employees, like in which you worked, or how people felt? Like, what was the one thing that you did, or that Hotjar did, that made it a game changer for people?
For the employees.
Yes.
Yeah, to me, this is an easy question, and it probably is the one I'm the most proud about. I will say I still am recovering from burnout, which is crazy. But I really want to find time somehow to kind of speak more about this message when it makes sense to build a company in this way. But I think to us, the biggest realization of the founders when we sat down and said, how do we build a company which like we would love to be in? What we found was the freedom component. So for us, it wasn't about remote. It was about how do we build a distributed business, right? So what are the things that we hated before? So we hated going into a business and someone approves your leave, or you don't really know how the business is doing, or decisions are all like have to go up to the boss who approves and all this stuff, right? So for us, the vision was to create a truly distributed business, not just in terms of where the team is sitting down, but basically everything. So, and we had this core belief in the beginning that if we did this, we would empower people. And there are so many people that were like us and hated how they were treated before that this was going to be a game changer. And we were right. And then when we realized that other people felt the same way, we went all in. So we had this concept of trust from day zero. And there's some interesting stories around this, okay? So when we started, we hired a few people. We got it completely wrong, right? So with Hotjar, we learned through making big mistakes. And anyway, it was a shit show, went wrong, and we sat down and we said, oh my God, what did we do? Like, but we literally had like our codes released kind of thing, revenge code release stuff, right? And they're like, oh my God, what do we do? And the instinct, right, is to go with lock down the laptops, like we are. And instead we were like, no, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to hire more carefully. And the moment someone joins, we're going to be trust from day zero. So people, we give them a credit card, Hotjar, like we give them the ability to buy but obviously with guidelines, procedures. We're still nerdy and geeky, right, and structured. But you book your own leave. But there are rules of how you do it, and you have to communicate, right? We created a way for people, because we heard feedback from them, that it was a little bit lonely working in a distributed way, right? So we created a budget for people to go and visit each other, but again with rules. They have to publish it, others can join. Anyway, this was refined over time.
Did it ever happen that somebody betrayed your trust?
Of course.
What did you do
in
then?
I think I was lucky enough to be able to just tell myself, you trust again.
Mm.
But it takes a toll, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It erodes a little bit at your soul.
yeah. Because
But
I really really like this point, because what you're the most passionate about, it's not about distributed. Sure, I mean you are passionate about distributed, but you're passionate about trust, right? And what that
yeah,
unlocks to you, right?
yeah,
Because as I listen to you, and your eyes light up talking about how you gave them the credit cards and whatnot. Super good, right? It's not about the credit cards. It's about you really believing in your people and letting them do their own decisions. And this again brings back to the failure that you were saying, letting them, even if they do something wrong, it is what it is, right?
yeah. Which, by the way, we didn't answer that question. Doesn't mean that you like there were situations where people broke that trust and we had to say bye and that was it. And then when we reached that point, we learned when we knew we had to be
Yeah,
immediate
yeah,
and absolute.
yeah, yeah.
But again, going back to that question we said before, I think there's a difference between making failing because you're experimenting and you're trying and lack of performance over a consistent time. But
Mm,
again, I think I try to make it come back to me, right? My job is to set goals or a plan, right, with specific goals for the team to hire the right people to do the job.
mm,
Because that's another thing, right? Is it
mm,
that people are not performing, or maybe we hire the wrong people to do the
yeah.
job? That's another thing. So as always, you always have to make it. It always has to come back, and that was actually one of our values initially. I think it wasn't a value; it was one of our like internal kind of ways of thinking, which is always our fault.
Mm,
It's always our fault. So the right goal has to be the right people hired, and then you need to give feedback quickly, immediately,
mm,
like constantly to help address to make sure that we're on the right path.
mm, mm. So, I mean, there's so much passion in you talking about all of what you build in Hotjar. What's next for you?
That's a good question. So the first one is I need to sort out the burnout stuff. No, but to be honest, look, the big realization for me was I have young kids, they're 10 and 7. I grew up in a household with a working dad, a working mom. We weren't by any way poor, but we
Mm,
worked hard to live well. So I'm lucky in that way. But I feel I have this amazing opportunity to spend time with them, to do stuff with them.
mm,
So my absolute top priority is that.
mm,
Because I know in a few years they probably won't even want to be next to me anymore. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm really enjoying helping others, like advising people, more helping, especially early startups.
mm,
I'm investing as well, angel investment,
mm,
and also doing investing on a different level. Also doing what I can about what I'm passionate about
mhm,
when it comes to, I'm quite passionate about how we think about reforestation and protecting ecosystems. So that's
mm,
something I'm also privately passionate about. But yeah, I think the itch is still there. One
mm.
day there will be something else. Again, maybe when the kids are teenagers.
So, I think that this has been a really nice segue to the end of the podcast. I really enjoyed what we've discussed today, because it's something that's close to my heart as well. And if you would say, like, what's the number one thing that you would put in a mind of somebody that wants to build a really really good work environment, or a place in which people will enjoy working and be productive, what would that be?
Enjoy it and be productive. Yeah, I think, look, the single most important thing is purpose. Why are we doing this? And maybe it is to buy myself a Lamborghini, maybe promise people to take them for a ride. So you can't bullshit yourself into purpose, right? Like, so I think that's important. I think it's better to be honest. And if it's, let's make some good money, let's make our retirement plan all together and do it. So I think that's very important. But I say this to a lot of people, like the working environment is not easy today. Getting people to work for you is challenging, right? Especially when you're starting up. So I think it's worth doing what we did, which is to pause a little bit and think, just like you build a product, right? Like, what are we building here? What workplace are we building? What's special about it? What's different? And I think it's good to communicate that, like to put effort into building that, to curating that. So I think that goes a long way. And the more transparent you are about that, there are like-minded people to you, right? There's plenty of people who like Lamborghinis. There's plenty of people who have other purposes, right? So I think it's just having that alignment. I think it's really, really important for people to feel excited and come to work.
So finding your honest purpose in work and life.
Yeah.
Huh?
I think that's quite important.
Yeah. Okay, David, thanks for this chat today. I had a really, really great time. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
Good fun.
And good luck wherever the future takes you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay, David, thanks again for all the time on this podcast.
It's a pleasure.
I really, really enjoyed the chat today. Hope it was as good. Really, it was as good as it for you as it was for me. Is there anything special that you would like us to kind of edit, move, change? Any comments on this?
Nope, all good. I loved it.
Okay, good.
So and by the way, I had a look at what you guys are building.
Yeah,
impressive tech. Well done.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's my story is I started 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago as a student, saying that we will build something like a mobile phone while we were in college for $50K in 6 months. It took us $500,000 and 60 months. So exactly tenfold. We've exactly tenfold. And then like you, we've learned a lot on the go. But I think I'm lucky that I have really good co-founders that share my values and that allowed us to build like a culture which is, I imagine, not that different to what you guys built.
From the little I've seen and heard and what Rock mentioned to me, kudos for doing the 4-day week.
Yeah.
Mo, the CEO, he's obsessed about this. So he's saying one day he wants to start a company, and so that's the new thing. Like one day, like there's a small group of us, we want to go even more crazy. Like, how do we start a business which is like completely haywire?
Yeah, but I think it really, really comes down to what you said. And this is trust, right? You can't do all of these things if you're like my dad, right? My dad is a typical boomer. He has a company, an architectural bureau. He's doing a good job, but like he can't survive without seeing the people work. Like
finger on it.
Yeah, what are you browsing? What are you browsing about? Stuff like that, and there's really no trust there, right? And like somebody's scheming, scamming, not doing their job, and I'm like we're the polar opposite of that, and you can't build a modern organization without that.
Agreed. And that's actually one important thing that we didn't mention when we were talking about it, right? Which is when you do a distributed business and there is trust in everything, it's good for the business because it operates more effectively. But when you think about it, it makes no sense to not trust 98% of the team because 2 of them are fucked up.
Yeah.
So, but when you think about it, every job environment I was in was like that. Like everyone was on me because maybe they had 1-2 bad experiences.
For me, I never worked in an environment except my own company. Right.
So you don't know how shit it is out
there. Yeah. So I don't even have this.
It's bad, man.
It's really I don't have a benchmark. So I often thought like, oh, I really need to go work somewhere, like just to see how they work. But now, after all of these years, I think this was actually good because we have always strived to do better, and we didn't know better from what. So that meant better from what we were doing, and there's no benchmark. We need to be better. Like, what's better? Like, I don't know. It's better than this, and I can't compare. I mean, I can compare based on what people are saying, right? But
I'm telling you, it's really bad. And the core of it is, if I can take one more minute, because I'm quite passionate. I think the core of it is that today we still live in a world where people value more money than time. So I'm willing, why? Because I'm an idiot, to work for a company that treats me badly, because I'm going to make a lot of money. So high salary, toxic culture still wins.
Could be that could be one of the reasons, but I'm more. I look like at these people. I have some friends that are working in environments that are like objectively bad, right? But they don't know it can be, how much better it can be, right? This is their baseline. Imagine all of your years working in shitty companies. Like, this is what you know. Like, there's like only 9. Like, it's.
But to me, it's like we're talking about a shit product in an industry. So I think as we have more entrepreneurs like you that are willing to do things different, and as people start to value, that could be an interesting disruption, I think, that's coming.
Yeah. And I think I really enjoy what you said previously that we didn't touch upon. Perhaps we're gonna and then we did, all of these, I call them like woke subjects because they have this negative connotation, are really not that woke. They're just good business, right? And people don't like, especially boomers, they don't get that, right? It's like, why the hell aren't you working 13 hours a day? I know, because it's not good business, because we tried that and we tried the other way around. Yeah. And I can see like it's simply better, right? Sorry, we tried it, we tested it, and it is what it is now.
Yeah. Again, right, though, we're going back to humans are really bad at seeing the end result of something and applying it to them. If you have a startup, right, that just hit on this amazing technology, right? Let's say we're ChatGPT. We just fucking unlocked. Obviously, we're going to work 15 hours a day for the next 2-3 years because we just hit the ultimate gold mine. But that doesn't mean someone who's building an app to rent bikes should work 40. You see my point? So
I 100% agree. And
if I found the gold mine, right? I literally found the gold mine. Yeah. I think I would be like double down and work really hard because I know I'm not going to ever work again. So I think, again, it's all about, this is where we confuse a little bit. Like, we take elements from places and we say we should work like that because look at Elon Musk, look at Tesla, look at.
And doesn't make any sense. I really hate all of this kind of like the war stories from Steve Jobs and whatnot, because they're like, you're not Apple. This doesn't apply to you. Yeah, just being being an asshole doesn't
make you Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
No, sorry. It makes you Steve Jobs. It doesn't give you Apple.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. We're very bad at this. We see the end result. We say, let me copy the end result. We don't see that it took them like 3 decades to get there, and that's the result of them.
Plus very specific values, very specific culture, and very specific circumstances, plus a lot of luck.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. I think 80%.
Sure.
80% is luck. With Hotjar, it was luck. Yeah. Both ends of the story.
Good. David, again.
Great to chat. Best of luck.
Thanks for everything.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Evening.